2020 is over. Can you guys believe it? This has been both the longest and the quickest year of my life. I don't even know how that's possible. But anyways, it's the end of the year, which means it is time for the best and worst books of 2020. So this video is going to be my favorite books of 2020, and I'll insert a link to my least favorite books of 2020, which should be going up about the same time this one is. I read, I think, 66, 67 books this year, which is pretty good for me. The past couple years I've been reading like 50 because I've been so busy with school, so I'm proud of myself. I know some people read like 120 books a year, but like 60 something's good for me. So, without further ado, let me just jump into the books and show you my favorite books of 2020. So first, I'm going to start with my honorable mentions. My first honorable mention is The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. I have heard mixed reviews on this book. At first, everyone loved it, but then I watched a couple videos, and this is on some people's least favorite book of the year. So, I don't know, but I enjoyed it. I thought this was super fun. It was entertaining. I flew through it. I read it like one sitting by the pool this summer. I just had a fun time with this book. This story is a hate-to-love romance about these two people who end up going on a honeymoon together. The best man and the maid of honor, their siblings were the ones getting married, and they end up going on the honeymoon because everyone at the wedding gets sick, including the bride and groom. And they were the only two who didn't get sick at the wedding because they didn't eat the bad seafood that they had at the reception. But anyways, these two people hate each other, they go on the honeymoon and fall in love. I enjoyed it. I thought it was just such a sweet romance. This is the perfect summer romance. If you want a good book to read this summer, it's perfect. My other honorable mention is Pachinko, and I think the author is Kim Jin Lee, something like that. I can't really remember. I don't have the physical copy of the book with me. This book was just so different from anything I've ever read before. This follows the story of a Korean family. They start off in Korea, they move to Japan. It goes through a couple generations. It was just a good, heartwarming family story. It's unlike anything I've ever read before, totally out of my comfort zone, but I'm so glad I read this because it just like expanded my boundaries of what I can read and what I can enjoy. I learned a lot and it was really entertaining. It was just very good, very different. So put this on your list for next year if you haven't read it already. Okay, those are my honorable mentions. So now it's time to get into my top 10 favorite books of 2020. Are you ready? Let's go. Coming in at number 10, we have New Kid by Jerry Craft. I'm very surprised that this book made it onto my list because this is a middle grade graphic novel. Like, first of all, I don't read middle grade anymore, and I've never read a graphic novel. This is the first graphic novel I've ever read. And it was obviously really good. And I was surprised that I could actually read a graphic novel because they've always scared me. I don't know, it's so stupid, but I always could never figure out how to read them. You know, like, I was always confused. I was like, how do you read the boxes? But trust me, it's not that hard. So if you haven't read a graphic novel before, try one. So this boy is in middle school and his dream is to go to a fancy art school because he is an artist. He draws comic books and comic strips, but instead his parents put him in a prestigious private school and he just does not fit in at this private school. He's not fancy and rich like the other students, and he's a minority in a school that's primarily white, so he's kind of an outcast in this new school, and it's just about him trying to make friends in the struggles of middle school. You know, we all been there. Middle school's not a fun time no matter where you are, who you are. But this was a really good graphic novel, so definitely pick this up. Coming in at number 9, we have If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. I read this book this past October or November. I've talked about it a few times on my channel. I thoroughly enjoyed this book. I don't know why it stands out to me so much, but it just does. Maybe because it's about a group of thespians, and I am also a thespian, and I miss theater so much. I haven't been able to do a show in over a year, so you know, the struggle. It was just really intriguing and just, I don't know. The writing was just kind of unlike anything I've ever read before. Like, it was just normal, but it was also really good writing. I don't know how to describe it. This book follows 7 thespians in their senior year of college. If you don't know, a thespian is someone who is in theater, a theater person. And these 7 seniors are putting on a Shakespeare play, and one of their castmates dies. And so you kind of just go through the mystery of, it's a whodunit story basically. But it's so intriguing because they're all actors and they get so deep into their characters that you see them kind of almost become the characters that they play on stage. And they just get so caught up in those roles that it's hard to differentiate the role and the person, you know? So it's really intriguing. It's really good. They quote Shakespeare a lot, which I'm not a fan of because I freaking hate Shakespeare, but that's the only kind of plays these people put on. It's all Shakespeare all the time, so definitely read this if you haven't already. I really, really enjoyed it. And this is a good new adult novels. I say this a lot on my channel that I wish that they were more new adult novels because I'm kind of outgrowing the teenagers, but I'm also not quite ready for people who are like married with kids, you know? So this is a good in-between because they are seniors in college. Yeah, so this is good for that. Moving in to number 8. This book was a huge surprise, and that is City of Saints and Thieves by Natalie C. Anderson. This blew me away. I had no idea what to expect, but it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. So this story follows a young girl who lives in Kenya, and she is part of this gang, and she wants to find her mother's killer. Her mom used to work for this fancy rich man, and then she died, and she thinks it's the fancy rich dude's fault. So she wants to figure out like why she was murdered, how it happened, and, you know, get revenge. But things are not always quite what they seem in this book. So it's just, oh, it's so good. I don't want to give too much away. I love this setting because I don't think I've ever read a book set in Africa. So it's just cool to experience a book that has a completely different setting than what I'm used to. And this book is just so good. I love stuff about gangs and crime and assassinations, which I know doesn't really fit my vibe, but I love that kind of stuff. So this is great. It's just like, if you like all those fantasy assassin books, pick up this one because it's got all that awesome intrigue and power struggles and whatever, but it's set in a real country with real people in the modern world. So just try this one. It's so good and it's just so unexpected. Coming in at number 7, I have a trilogy actually, and that is the Renegades trilogy by Marissa Meyer. This trilogy was so good. Now this is just the first book, which is Renegades. The second book is Arch Enemies, and the third book is Supernova. These books were so good. I basically just binge read them this summer. They're just delicious. They were just so easy to read. I could fly through them. I had a fantastic time. If you want to binge read a trilogy sometime soon, pick up Renegades if you haven't already. So Renegades is basically this dystopian world where superheroes are pretty common and they, you know, protect the world. The superheroes are known as the Renegades and they protect the city, you know, as superheroes should. And in the past, there's like this big battle between the superheroes and the villains. Some of the villains are still like around, they're just living underground. And the youngest villain is a teenager, so she decides to infiltrate the Renegades ranks and take them down from the inside. And you just kind of like watch her journey as she goes as an undercover spy. And it's just, it's so good. I loved all the characters, they were just so fun. It was really good, so pick this book up. Coming in at number 6 is no surprise to me, and that is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. A couple of years ago, it might have been just 1 year ago, maybe 2 years ago, The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo was my favorite book. That book is so good. Let me show it to you. You've probably all heard of this book. It was really popular a couple of years ago, and that's for good reason. Oh my god, this book is so good. So if you haven't read this one, go read it. But I read that a couple of years ago. And then I picked up Daisy Jones and the Six because I knew I loved the author. And this book was so good. And this was really a fun read because it's not a typical narration. This is told in interviews. And the interview style just made it more engaging and just more unique, and I just had fun with it. So this band was called Daisy Jones and the Six. They were really popular in the 1970s, and the author has decided to interview them and put their story together just to tell the story of the band and what happened, why they're no longer together, you know, that kind of stuff. It was just really good. Just a story of like humans and bands. I don't know. It was good. I liked it. That's really all you need to know. Check this out. Coming in at number 5 on the list is Molokai by Alan Burnett. This book was so good, caught me totally by surprise. Again, an unexpected favorite. My boyfriend's friend's mom was giving this book away at a garage sale, and I was like, I'll take it. It looks cool. And it was. It was a great choice to pick this book up. This book starts in the late 1800s, like 1890s. And it follows the story of a young girl who lives in Hawaii and she has leprosy. And the lepers in Hawaii were all sent off to a private island so they couldn't infect anyone. So as a young girl, she's sent off to this island, taken away from her family to go live with the other leopards. And it just follows her life on the island. And this is crazy because I had no idea that this island was a thing. And it was a thing from like the late 1800s all the way through like the 1960s. So it just follows the story of the girl as she grows up, how she finds love, how she makes a community on this island. It was so good. And just thinking that this was like a real thing that happened to people is ridiculous. Like, she was 5 when she was taken from her family. That's crazy. I feel like historical fiction, pick this book up. Really, really good. Coming in at number 4 is Before We Were Yours by Lisa Wingate. I don't have my physical copy. I think my grandma's borrowing it. I don't know, but here's the book. This book, again, an unexpected surprise. My mom had just seen this book and heard good things about it, so she picked it up one day at the store, and we both loved it. This book has 2 timelines and 2 perspectives. The first timeline is a young girl. She's not that young, I guess. She's probably like her late 20s, early 30s, maybe. And her father is a senator, and he is becoming ill, so she comes home to take care of him and help him with all of his senator stuff. And while she's there, she meets this old woman who looked a lot like her grandmother, and there's like some suspicious things happening. So this girl has to figure out the true history and past of her grandmother and what scandal is happening hidden behind the scenes. The other storyline is about young children who lived on a Mississippi riverboat who were taken from their parents and put in an orphanage and sold as orphans to different families even though they had parents. The parents just happened to leave one night because the mom was pregnant and was giving birth, and they had to like get off the boat and go to the hospital. And while they were at the hospital, the children were kidnapped and taken to this orphanage. So you just watch those 2 storylines play out, and it's so good. And this was also based on true events. Apparently, during the 1930s, I think this was the 30s, this was a big thing that happened where children's homes or orphanages would go kidnap children who had parents, but the parents like gone for a couple minutes, so they steal the kids and then sell them to other families. And like, it's crazy. Just the fact that that was what was really going on, that really happened, is wild. Like, there are these crazy cases of people who've just been ripped from their real family, given to another family, and they never like reunite with their siblings or their parents. It's just really sad. But this book, really, really good. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I highly recommend it. Now we are into our top 3 favorite books of 2020. Are you guys ready? Okay, coming in at number 3 on my top 10 favorite books of 2020 is I Was Anastasia by, what's her name? By Ariel Lawhon. This book was so good, and it just sparked a fascination with the Romanov family for me. So this summer, I read this book, I watched all these documentaries about the Romanovs, I got really into the Anastasia musical. Like, I was just in an Anastasia mode, all because of this book. Now, if you don't know the history behind Anastasia Romanov, she was a princess of Russia during like the late 1800s, early 1900s. So Princess Anastasia of Russia was murdered along with her entire family sometime during like 1920 or 1918, something like that. Their entire family was murdered when Russia was undergoing its revolution. And a couple years later, this young woman named Anna Anderson pops up out of nowhere and claims to be the lost princess Anastasia. Now this has been, like, this is a true story. A woman did claim to be Anastasia. It was proven that she wasn't Anastasia. They later found the body of Anastasia and, you know, whatever. But it sparked a lot of like hope, and just a lot of things happen. That's what the Anastasia musical and movies based off of. You know, there's a lot of stuff with Anastasia. But this book is so cool because it follows Anastasia's story and Anna Anderson's. So it alternates about every chapter, and Anna Anderson's story works backwards, and Anastasia's story works forwards until they meet in the middle when Anastasia dies and Anna Anderson appears. So it's just really cool because the entire time it kind of has you wondering, well, maybe Anna Anderson really is Anastasia. She plays a very convincing Anastasia, and then just hearing the story of what happened to the Romanov family is just so depressing. Like, oh, it broke my heart, honestly, but this book is so good. If you like Russian history and you love the story of Anastasia, definitely pick this book up. It was just so good, and I learned a lot about the Romanovs, and I learned a lot about Anna Anderson's claim to fame. So definitely pick this up if you like history. Time for my top 2. Okay, my second favorite book of 2020 is The Princess Bride by William Goldman. I just love this book so much. I grew up with the movie, and I loved the movie for as long as I can remember. And when I read the book, it was just such a good feeling. And it just made me laugh out loud. It was hilarious. It was just so much fun. If you haven't watched the movie Princess Bride, stop what you're doing and go watch it. One of the best movies of all time. If you love the movie and have never read the book, read the book because it was just so nostalgic for me, and I just had such a lovely time reading it. I just enjoyed myself so much reading this book. This book is a fairy tale about love and adventure, and it's just hilarious, so go pick this up. That's all I'm gonna say. It's just, this was so wonderful. I'm so glad I finally read the book. I still haven't rewatched the movie since finishing this, so I really need to get on that. And, drum roll please. You can't. My all-time favorite book of 2020, are you ready, is Chain of Gold by Cassandra Clare. Are we surprised? Absolutely not. I love Cassandra Clare. I love her books. I love the Shadowhunter world. And Chain of Gold is my favorite book of this year because I had such a great time. I loved it. The main reason this book is held so highly in my mind and in my heart is because I loved the characters in this book. The characters were just, they were great. This book was just, it was so good. I read it so quickly, I could not put it down. It was so addicting. I read it in the middle of the school week and I was like, I can't put it down. I gotta put all my work on hold until I finish this book. If you haven't read Cassandra Clare's books by now, I don't know what you're doing. Have you been on BookTube long? Because everyone talks about it. It's so good. I cannot wait for the second book. I'm so excited for Chain of Iron. I think that comes out in like March, maybe? I don't know, but this book was just so, it was so good. I don't think I'll ever be over the Shadowhunter series. Well, actually, there is a Shadowhunter book on my worst books of 2020, so we'll get into that controversy in the other video if you want to watch that. Again, I'll leave it linked up here and in the description below. I love this book. It was so good. Okay, I think that's all I have to share with you guys. Oh, I didn't tell you anything about Chain of Gold. Shadowhunters is a urban fantasy series with a lot of different timelines and people who fight demons. That's all you need to know. Go pick up City of Bones. It's the first one. Now, I can say goodbye to you all. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Comment down below what your favorite book of 2020 was. I'd love to check it out. Let me know if you've read any of these books, if you enjoyed them. You know, just tell me your thoughts down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Go watch my other video, my least favorite books of 2020, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!